The Charlotte Hornets lose a close game against the Miami Heat. They do so shorthanded. What can we realistically take away from this game? We discuss it today on Locked On Hornets.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. There's Doug Branson. You can find him on everyhornetsboxscore.com with all sorts of write-ups. You can also see him on YouTube with the background. Has to be pretty close to complete, right, Doug? I mean,
yeah, what do you think?
Looks great.
I've pretty close. I've got a few places on the wall to cover up, but I've got bobbleheads up. I've got the Baron Davis and Mashburn jersey up. You can't see it, but I've got the there you go. If I turn now, you can see the sort of section for misfit bobbleheads. I've got a Lance Stevenson there. I got a Dwight Howard. Got all kinds of misfit.
Do you have a Frank Kaminsky Stormtrooper bobblehead in there somewhere?
I do. Yeah, he's back there. It's going to be tough to see. You're going to have to zoom in on YouTube if you want to see that. But yeah, okay. I really like the new setup. It's great.
No, it does look very good. Plus, we love Shea Serrano. Watched our podcast one-time poster that you hung up right above the left side of your head as you're watching this. And so really cool to see all of that. And yeah, I like it. Now, what I apologize for is the fish tank promise. I mean, it wasn't even a promise. It was something I thought might happen because of the construction going on in the house. And then people shout out to Rachel, listening to the pod. It came up with probably the best list of puns that we've ever had from a single listener, Doug. Ick Batum. Ick is a parasite that will infiltrate tanks. Ick Batum. I mean, it's freaking brilliant. It's brilliant.
Yeah,
so,
Batum infiltrated our salary cap for too long.
I mean, there are too many parallels to make. So, no, I apologize, Nick. Great stuff there. Maybe the fish tank makes an appearance. Maybe it doesn't. But at least Doug's background is looking great. I'm Walker Mayo. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. So I didn't get to watch this game live. I was broadcasting the Queens men's basketball game, the home opener against High Point. Great game. Came down to the wire. They won 74-72. But that's not why you came here. I was checking my phone live for Hornets updates. I was going to spoil it and then go back and watch it later. And the Hornets were tied. I think it was somewhere in the second quarter. Maybe they were even up a few times. And so I felt like, okay, maybe we can squeak this one out, turn on the broadcast on WFNZ. Sam Farber informs me that they're fouling. They fell down 6, and they were not going to be able to take care of this one. Doug, eyes on it live. What were you making of this game as it was unfolding?
Yeah, it was exciting to watch them in the first quarter. A shorthanded team, only 10 players available. Asked after the game if Steve Clifford had to give them any kind of rah-rah speech. He basically said no. That everyone looked around and said, "Oh, hey, there's only 10 of us left. I guess we gotta really turn up the heat on this one, if you will." And so that was exciting. I mean, really, it came down to Hornets finally decided to hit some three-point shots, and it was mostly LaMelo and PJ. I think they took the first, I want to say like 8 to 10 attempts were all PJ and LaMelo, and they were hitting three-point shots. And you know, that's been the big story this year. They haven't taken or made a lot of three-point shots, and it's made it difficult to build leads. It's made it difficult to come back in games. And you even had a few unexpected players making three-point shots like Bryce McGowan's. But it was short-lived because they were shorthanded, because they didn't have a lot of the talented players that they depend on to kind of carry them through the different quarters, and they were having to reach deep in the bag to, you know, fill out the rotation. And so in the second quarter, PJ disappeared. LaMelo, floundered a little bit, and the Heat are the Heat. I mean, they've got a lot of talented players, and they're a tough team. And they eventually made their way back into the game, and the Hornets didn't have enough firepower at the end to kind of finish a comeback.
The bench, the rotation, the lack of depth, it's hurting this team when they're at full strength. And it's certainly hurting them when they're not at full strength. I mean, this is the rotation right now, and this is the group that got off the bench and actually played. I thought maybe Leaky Black would see more minutes, but he only got 3. So Nick Richards played 25, played more than Mark Williams, actually played in the fourth quarter. Steve Clifford said Nick Richards was helping our team play better than when Mark Williams was out there. So Nick Richards gets 25, Ish Smith gets 19, Bryce McGowan's gets 29, almost 30 minutes of action. And Nick Smith Jr., he makes his meaningful debut. He actually gets 15 minutes in this contest. And if you listen to Steve Clifford after the game, said Nick Smith Jr. played better than the guys that were out there. I mean, he's learning. First half, it was a lot for him. That they do a lot of stuff that he wasn't ready for. And then in the second half, he seemed ready. And he played better than the other vets, maybe, the other players that you would normally put in your rotation. So Nick Smith Jr. should take those comments and run with them. Like, that is basically Steve Clifford saying he played like Michael Jordan. I mean, it's tough. But with the fact that you get in and you impress Steve Clifford enough to continue to warrant those minutes over some of the other guys, I mean, Doug, not that he's the main story, but he took advantage of an opportunity, I think, last night. And I know fans have to be happy because I know they've wanted to see him quite a bit.
Yeah, you say he should take the comments and run. That's all he does when he's out there. He's running around. He's a little scamp. He's a little rascal when he's out there. And he was disruptive. He was disruptive at times defensively because he just has an intensity that is noticeable. It pops off the screen. But I think it's there's two sides of that comment, right? It's noticeable because not a lot of the Hornets possess that same kind of intensity on the defensive end of the floor. And so you see it with Nick Smith Jr. But look, I mean, you know, he took a lot of attempts in that last game when he got in and sort of garbage time minutes for the Knicks. And this one, I thought he did a better job of sort of like figuring out, all right, am I going to, you know, actually find a good shot here? Or do I need to pass it? I thought he was making decent passes, both in the Knicks game and this game. I saw a few just sort of basic NBA passes that I haven't seen him been able to make so far. He's making them. So that's what you want to see out of Nick Smith Jr. You want to see these small opportunities to play with the big squad. You know, if they get healthy, you know, I still think that Nick Smith Jr. eventually makes his way down to Greensboro to get some meaningful minutes there. But this is what you want to see. You want to see improvement throughout the season. You want to see a different Nick Smith Jr. from game one or summer league to when, you know, he's eventually playing meaningless minutes if the Hornets don't find themselves in playoff contention. You want to see a different version of Nick Smith Jr., and I think you're starting to see glimpses of it already.
All right, let's go back to the two players that really kept them in this game before we move on and go into the weeds a little more. Also talk about the Mark Williams thing, not playing fourth quarter, even a potential player the Hornets could pursue on the trade market. But PJ and LaMelo, I think a couple things on each guy. Starting with PJ, this was the first game that PJ Washington had been thrust into a role like he played last year, because of the injuries. Now they're real shorthanded in this game. They're real shorthanded everywhere last season, right? Gordon Hayward's not playing. Terry doesn't play at times, although he played still a decent amount. And LaMelo is not available. They relied a lot on PJ then. They had to rely on him a lot here. You mentioned the fourth quarter, him not having a shot, but man, he started 5 of 5 from the 3-point line. So he kept the minute. That was a offensive responsibility where you can feel okay with him in spots. You do not want this long term, because even here, Doug, you couldn't get the victory because he wasn't hitting at that level in the fourth. What do you want, right? 32 points. It's going to be tough, but it didn't happen for him because they just didn't have enough firepower to go to. That's one thing on PJ. The other thing on LaMelo, and I'll let you speak to this more because you wrote about it on HornetsBoxscore.com. You thought this was a polarizing performance, and I can see why. So the 3-point shot, it's fallen for LaMelo now. There are things that he's doing that when we discuss, oh, he looks like the old LaMelo, and we mean it in a positive way, there are also some negative comments to that. The old LaMelo fouls a lot, and LaMelo here is starting to foul a lot again. I mean, he had 5 personal fouls, Doug. So he had 5 against Miami. He had 5 against Washington Friday. He had 6. He fouled out against Dallas. He had 5 against the Pacers, too. And that's only going back to November 4th. And so if you go back to the beginning of the season, the first 2 games, okay, only 3, only 1. All right, he's learning. Then he fouls out against Brooklyn. So the fouls are still here for LaMelo. Not that it's going to affect his minutes. It can't. Like, you just don't have that response. You don't have that ability to be like, all right, well, let's throw Ish out there. You know, we'll see what happens. No. LaMelo is playing with 4 fouls, even if it happens in the second quarter. And then the turnovers in this game weren't great, with 8 turnovers, but still a lot of weight on his shoulders. Talk about the polarizing performance of LaMelo, Doug.
Well, I think it was LaMelo and PJ. Both had polarizing performances. I thought it was one of the more impressive offensive nights I've seen from PJ since like early to mid last season when he was the featured player of the offense due to injuries. He kind of retook that mantle, 52% shooting, made 6 threes. That looked like the old PJ, but he turned the ball over and couldn't hit shots in the fourth quarter. LaMelo, yeah, I mean, some of these turnovers were brutal where he's just trying to take guys off the dribble and he spins into a double team. Like, you have to understand that you're playing the Miami Heat. And the Miami Heat, they're going to throw zone at you. They're going to switch defenses mid-possession. They're going to throw the press at you. And through like the last 3 quarters, it was full court press, it felt like. And there were times where both PJ and LaMelo just dribbled into double teams into that press and didn't pass the ball. And those were possessions that Miami were used to stave off that final run by the Hornets, to build a lead in the middle of the game and then to stave off that final run. And so I call it polarizing because you look at it and you go, man, I mean, they got them into this game to begin with. And then, PJ shooting in the third kept them in the game. But then, I mean, honestly, they were all they had. And so in the fourth quarter, they went back to him and it looked like maybe legs, maybe frustration. This LaMelo fouling situation, I think, is all rooted in the fact that he's not getting a great whistle on the other end. Clifford's upset about it. He got a tech. LaMelo's upset about it. He's working on some techs too. But I mean, in the middle of that fourth quarter, I was writing in Hornets box score at 9:50. Good God, what is LaMelo doing here on defense? After timeout, LaMelo turns it over, full court press. LaMelo then misses a deep contested pull-up 3. That goes to shot selection. LaMelo, frustration foul. But then after that, he throws it way up to Richardson for an alley-oop, and has another deep 3. It's sort of an up and down kind of thing. And you look at it and you go, how much are you going to punish these guys for that when the rest of the roster looks like it does right now?
Yeah, and LaMelo in the third didn't take too many shots. He only took 3, and PJ took 8 in each of the last 2 quarters. How about 8 field goals for PJ in the third quarter and 8 field goals from PJ in the fourth? Now, he only missed one more in the fourth. It was another 3-point shot that he missed. He was 1 of 3 in the fourth. He was 1 of 2 in the third. But PJ and LaMelo both weren't 3 of 8. And so, like, when you're not hitting at an above 50% average, and you can't go to Terry, you can't draw anything for Gordon, Brandon Miller isn't going to provide any offense off the bench, and we know how much they think Miles Bridges is an answer to some of that. That's 4 guys, Doug. I mean, think about how much you're missing there, especially if we include Miles Bridges, who is one of the 3 most talented players on this roster when he's on. Miles, Brandon, Gordon, Terry. That is what, all but 2 pieces of their talent. I mean, it's a lot that they're missing. So
right, but
awesome fight. You wish but Steve Clifford didn't give them any excuses though in that post game.
Well, I kind of struggle too as well, because look, bottom line is LaMelo had a chance to carry the team and get a win in that game, and he was trying to take Jimmy Butler off the dribble, and Butler put him in the crowd. And it was just easy. And before that, same thing. Fourth quarter, 6:46, terrible drive, turnaround mid-range shot at the free throw line by LaMelo. Like, you look at those possessions and you go, why is that happening? Why is he trying to take guys off the dribble like that and end up in a free throw mid-range shot turnaround that goes nowhere? It's got to be better shot selection than that, and it lost the game. That
was a tough one too, because I know a lot of people that hate Heat, that hate the Heat.
They're annoying.
So that one's frustrating. The fan base, I know they were chanting at the end. Maybe we can get to that in just a moment. So let's also go to a player that the Hornets could pursue on the trade market in order to help the lack of depth that we're talking about, or really just help the star power on this team. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Should the Hornets pursue Zach LaVine? Yes, that's a first take topic, baby. Yep, that's what we got for you coming up next. This episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long, whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire. Every week, we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for this week's eBay Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Pick of the Week. All right, a couple of guys here. A lot of young ones. How about Bilal Coulibaly? Wizards rotations continue to be all over the place, but Bilal has played 30-plus minutes in the last 2 games.
He beat up on the Hornets.
Massive defensive option. Watching him live, his arms go for days. You can see it on TV too, but Coulibaly is an impressive defender. Really locked up a couple guys against the Hornets. You're right about that. Kyle Lowry, how about a blast from the past? Another couple young guys too, Keontae George, Skylar Mays. So those are some of the Locked On Fantasy picks. eBay Guaranteed Fit sponsored Locked On Fantasy Basketball Guaranteed Picks. So if you have a personal experience about buying a part from your car and it's better than eBay Motors, then we highly doubt it. I would have to imagine eBay Motors is the best opportunity for you to go buy a car. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. More Locked On Hornets coming up. Doug, I think we got our first bad sign from the Chicago Bulls after the first game when there was a players-only meeting.
Yeah.
And since then, all of the signs pointing to that foundation not winning in the postseason have reared its head early. Zach Lowe was on The Jump, or not The Jump. Yeah, I think it was. I forget what that show's called now. Like I watch it. It's like NBA Today. Is that what it is? All right, NBA Today. Zach Lowe was on that show yesterday discussing how that foundation, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, Nikola Vucevic, they have a negative point differential when they're on the court, and it's been true for the last 3 years. So Zach LaVine is a name we've thrown out. I think we talked about DeMar DeRozan, Doug, at the beginning of the season or in the offseason when we had the number 2 pick and we had not made that selection yet. Rod asked you about pursuing DeMar DeRozan even after the first 3-4 games from Brandon Miller. Is there a different Bull that the Charlotte Hornets should be going after in Zach LaVine?
Well, I was afraid that they were going to go after DeMar DeRozan, although now looking at this roster and how many 2-point shots they take, he would fit right in. Like you wouldn't have to figure out where DeMar DeRozan fits within this offensive scheme. The offensive scheme is DeMar DeRozan right now. But no, all eyes are on Zach LaVine right now. Shams Charania tweeting yesterday that NBA teams are probing the availability of the Bulls' 2-time All-Star, and there is increased openness from both sides about exploring a trade. So look, a lot of teams, I think, are going to be inquiring about Zach LaVine, and honestly, I think the Hornets would be crazy not to inquire about what it would take because this roster, as it's currently constructed, is devoid of the level of talent necessary to make the postseason. And so if their desire is to make the postseason, within the next couple of seasons, having a guy with the talent level of Zach LaVine, yes, he struggled to begin this year, but I think you can just wave your hands at the Bulls and go, yeah, I understand that. But if you look at the past couple of seasons before he signed this massive contract, points per shot attempt, 121.9, 122.4, that's all in the 85th percentile among NBA wings. The Hornets still need wing talent. I mean, I think Brandon Miller is, you can't have enough of these big type of wings. And I think it would be great to have both of those players involved in the offense at this point. Great 3-point shooter would help there. Yeah, I think it would be crazy for the Hornets not to get involved in this conversation.
Well, okay, yeah, but like that's an old radio vet move right there. They're crazy not to get involved, but then when we talk about what to give up, and then would it be like, of course you inquire, because if you can get them for something less than 100 cents on the dollar, then that might be worth it. But when you're talking about what it would actually take to give up, then it gets a little dicey in my opinion.
It's a lot of first-round picks. It's a lot of first-round picks. I mean, it's going to be probably Rudy Gobert level first-round pick giving up.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's too much for me. I mean, especially Rudy Gobert level. But I get inquiring about him. Like, the guy offensively is very, very good and just a legit shooter. Even if you expect the shooting percentages to go up for some of these players once they come back, Zach LaVine is going to be I mean, is he going to be the best shooter when he's on the squad? I mean, he's been that good the last few seasons. So, of course, you inquire about that. 42% 3 years ago, 39, 38, rough start this year. But, if the numbers are going to go back to where they were, he'll be phenomenal once again. Now, he's a net negative defensively. That's the problem, right? If you have a problem with Terry Rozier and LaMelo Ball as your defensive backcourt, LaVine does not fix that. LaVine would be very good at the catch and shoot with LaMelo dribble and drive, kick out. And you also have some athleticism offensively. He's a vet, but he's not old, right? He's going to be 29, I guess, somewhat soon. So those are all things to consider. Does Zach LaVine get you to the postseason? You take a shot. It fits the do something moniker where you get rid of a couple of first round picks. I think for me, Doug, ultimately what it would take to go get him, I would say no to this. But Zach LaVine, it'd be exciting to have him on the squad. It's one of those, like, it's not, oh my God, I would love to get this guy. That's not how I feel, but it would definitely be exciting. And certainly offensively, it's all about, does Steve Clifford think about, and does management, who even knows if they're going to be here, right? There's a good chance that they're not. But does the foundation of the Charlotte Hornets, whoever is making the decision, do they view it worth it to take a step back defensively, pay this guy, $40 million annually, 48 by the time his contract is up? And does that take them to the promised land? If it wasn't working so much for the Bulls and they had a pretty good player at every level, different team structure here, but this is one where it's tough for me to say, okay, yeah, here are three first round picks before we even get to Rudy Gobert level, and we'll take Zach LaVine.
Well, look, they can't take a step back defensively. They are literally last in the league in points per possession allowed at 121.9, dead last. So there's no step back. Their step back would be.
But they wouldn't take a step forward. They wouldn't take a step forward with this move.
So I mean, yes, getting Zach LaVine would represent just like going all in on the offensive side of the floor, where they've been decent. I mean, Cleaning the Glass right now has them as a top 10 offense, strangely enough, not winning ball games because they can't defend anyone. But they've got them in terms of points per possession as a top 10 offense in the league. So you're really just sort of going for that similar model that they had 2 years ago when they made the playoffs. I mean, under Borrego, that team was 6th in points per possession and 20th in defense. So it's like, does LaVine make you any worse defensively? Probably not. Does he make you any better? Maybe not. Can Clifford figure that out? Who knows? At this point, it's tough, man, because I do take your point about the defensive end of the floor, and it makes me really upset that the Hornets as an organization have not invested better in and using all the tools available to them to go out and find role players that could be defensive helpers and instead rely on developing young talent, which just takes a long time. And when you're on that kind of timeline, it makes doing these moves to get Zach LaVine a little bit tougher when you don't have those role players already in place. There are going to be other teams that are going to say, yeah, Zach LaVine will be a step back defensively at that position, but we have other guys around that we can kind of pair around them. Yeah, I mean, you look at the Hornets roster and you go, really, like, what are they going to do? They signed Frank Ntilikina, for God's sakes, in the offseason as, like, defensive help. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, it's just...
Yeah. Well, and you're saying they won't, and I get your point, right? You're right. You quite literally can't take a step back. It is impossible. You can't be the 36th
You can't argue that point.
32.
It's fact. It's math. It's numbers.
No, that is true. No, your point is correct. But it could get worse. That gap between 32 and 31 could get worse. Because think about it. We're also needing to match salaries here. And Gordon Hayward is going to be the guy that you try to match salaries. And so Gordon Hayward's been good defensively. When he's out there, when he's on the floor, he's been good. So if you get rid of him to match that salary and then Zach LaVine comes back, you pay more money to a guy that offensively is better. I mean, he's been averaging close to 25 a game the last few seasons. So, yeah, it would be fun. At the same time, I think deep down in my soul, Doug, I would know, I don't think this does what I want it to. I don't think so, at least not for the long term. So that's how I would view it.
But if not, if not now, if you're going to pass on or fail to acquire star after star, I think a fan who's deciding whether to renew their season tickets or just buy tickets to a random game on a Wednesday has to ask themselves, and ask these new owners, if not now, when? Like, what's the plan? What are you trying to do here? Because what I'm watching on the floor night in and night out doesn't seem to be it. And I don't even get the vibe from the coach that this is like, that he's all that satisfied with what he's got available to him. And I don't just mean the shorthandedness of the Hornets, once again, bitten by the injury bug. I mean, my God, the Charlotte Hornets are the choose your own adventure novel, except every choice leads to half the team getting eaten by a squid. I mean, I don't know what kind of karmic punishment is being unleashed on the Charlotte Hornets. I've got a few ideas why, if there were karmic punishment, I've got a few ideas why it would be unleashed on the Charlotte Hornets.
What are they?
We'll get into it tomorrow, I'm sure.
Okay.
But, it's difficult to watch. It's difficult to deal with as a fan. And then when these kind of things come up, and then you got guys like us trying to get into the facts about, well, Zach LaVine hurts you here, he helps you here. It's like, I could just see a fan going, just go get talent. This team is, how can beggars be this choosy? Just go get the talent.
I'm pretty choosy too. I'm not going to lie. My ego won't die. All right. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Doug, you seem defeated in that segment right there. Like that seemed like it hurt you.
It's difficult. I just want to go to Vegas. I want this team to go to Vegas, and they took a step back. Not totally out of it.
Yeah.
Bucks, Hornets.
Yeah, this one has been depressing. But this next segment, well, maybe it's depressing depending on how you view it. Mark Williams did not play in the fourth quarter. Nick Richards did. Find out what the reasoning was in just a moment, but not before we talk about Ibotta. Big holidays mean big family get-togethers, but you don't have to spend all that money on the Thanksgiving spread without getting something in return. With Ibotta, you can get your turkey and all of your favorite sides for free. That's why this episode is brought to you by Ibotta. Having already started November 1st for the fourth year in a row, Ibotta is giving 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving feast. Just add the offers in the app to redeem for everything you need to make your Thanksgiving feast complete. All you have to do is shop at your favorite retailers and upload your receipt. Other apps give you the points that don't really amount to much, but with Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or even gift cards. Download the Ibotta app now and use code LOCKED to get 100% cash back on your Thanksgiving dinner starting November 1st. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code LOCKED. That's Ibotta, Ibotta, Ibotta in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKED. More Locked On Hornets. One more second. Doug, in this industry, we often talk about how, like, half the battle is just being in a good mood, like trying to find the spirit somewhere, trying to, it helps you, right? Whether you're in the public eye, on YouTube, on the radio. And while you have been doing a phenomenal job, you've been coming with all the important nuggets. I can just tell, because we've been doing this pod for a while, the Hornets have sometimes they really get you. Some losses hurt more than others. It feels like this is a loss that hurts more than others against the Miami Heat. I think a lot of Hornets fans understand that. But it feels like this one's getting you. How are you doing with your Hornets depression?
Well, I think when you're 3-7 and last in the league in defense, and your coach is oscillating between, a little mad and really mad at the team overall, I think there is a nuggets to smiles ratio that can't really be countered. Like the deeper I look into the game, the more I look at the details, the sadder I get. But that's I think that explains Clifford's mood, because he's super looking into the details of this and going, this isn't a playoff team. This isn't a play-in team. What am I dealing with here? But that's not the most depressing thing from last night. I've got the most depressing thing from last night. You ready for this?
Yeah,
so
I'm ready.
The Miami Heat hit buzzer beaters to end the second quarter and the third quarter. I think Butler's was in the third quarter, maybe Highsmith in the second quarter. And so even if the Hornets had been able to get the deficit from 4 to tie the game, I'm pretty confident that Butler was going to hit a game-winning shot. And the reason I'm confident is because our friend from WCNC, Nick Carboni, was in the building, and he tweeted this. I'd have to check, but I think I've seen the Hornets opponent hit a wild three-point shot to end a half at about 75% of the games I've covered at Spectrum Center. LOL. Well, listen, Nick, I'm not LOLing, sir. You are a jinx. You are a friend, but you are a jinx. And I need you to be escorted out of the building next time you go to Spectrum Center so that we can actually get in one of these games and stay in it.
So a couple of things, too. One, Jimmy Butler, I don't know if it's talked about as much, but a notorious Hornets killer.
And he was tired last night. He was hands on his knees. He was huffing and puffing, and he found it, man. And that's, when I talk, Zach LaVine is not Jimmy Butler. But they are the same in that they are game-changing kinds of talents. They are, I can lift an entire team on Zach LaVine dropped 50 on us one time, hit so many three-pointers, the Hornets absolutely couldn't come back.
Yes.
Yes. These are the kinds of guys that win ball games, and they win tough games. That's what I'm saying.
Can it's actually worse
than
I remembered. Okay. I feel like I know Lord of the Rings well enough, but I feel like, Doug, you are Gollum with the ring, except the ring is the nugget. And the more you hold on to the information nugget, the worse your mood is. And you start to go crazy and you hunch over and you lose your hair.
My effective field goal percentage.
It's so bad. Yeah.
My full court press.
I knew as soon as I said Gollum, that might get you in a better mood, even though it's hurting you deep down inside. Jimmy Butler has not shot anything less than 71% from the field in his last 4 outings against the Charlotte Hornets. 71%. And he scored 20 points in every single one of those games.
Okay.
The last time he did so was when he shot 58%. And he went for 35. That was November 10th of last year. So he has absolutely destroyed us. Not to mention, anytime I think of the Hornets and Jimmy Butler, you have to go back to the Kemba Walker 60-point game where Jimmy Butler said, nope, you cannot cap this off with the cherry on top. I'm going to win this game by hitting a game-winning 3, but at least you can have your moral victory, peasants, with your 60-point performance. We're going to get the real dub.
Okay. All of that, I take all of that in. I will say in Jimmy Butler's defense, at least when he comes to Charlotte to destroy them, at least he takes in some of the local shops. I saw this on the Axios Charlotte newsletter.
Yes, that's true.
He was at a coffee shop, a local coffee shop, and then he dined at Alexander Michael's, one of my absolute favorite places to eat in Charlotte. They famously denied Guy Fieri and the Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives show. They denied them, said, no, we don't want you here. So I love that, just rebelling against the thing that all of those little local haunts want to get involved in. But they were also in I was a Fourth Wardian, and they're in Fourth Ward. And so he took in dinner at Alexander Michael's. And so I love that. Look, if you're going to come to the city and destroy us, at least stop into some of the local hangs and contribute to the local economy. I appreciate that.
That's true. All right, let's get to the last bullet point. I've been going over Jimmy Butler stats against the Hornets. I actually have about 3 more I could roll with that are astonishing, but we won't do it anymore. I've already been hurt too much by
Jimmy Butler stats.
They do make me go crazy. Mark Williams, Doug, he did not play the entire fourth quarter. Nick Richards comes in and plays 25 minutes total. Now, the minutes discrepancy, actually not all that different. Mark Williams, 23, Nick, 25. Mark has played less than that at times this season. But I think what made it so visible was that it happened in closing time. So usually Mark Williams is a better option than Nick Richards. And so you just go back to Mark in the fourth quarter and it's not as visible. Here it was. And Steve Clifford addressed it after the game. He said we were playing better. And I got the
full quote.
Out.
You want the full quote?
Let's hear it.
He said, we just played a lot better when he was out there. He's talking about Nick Richards here. He said, we just played a lot better when he was out there. Our defense was better. Our pick and roll coverage was a lot better. And our rim protection was better, unquote, emphasis mine.
Yeah. So what do you make of that comment with Mark? So here's the thing, right? I want to take the floor before you do, because yesterday.
That's your guy. Mark Williams is your guy. So please take the floor.
Well, look, and this is what makes me happy. And when I mean happy, I mean drives me insane. What drives me insane is that you tweet something happy about a guy in a first game against the Hawks where he legitimately plays well. But I feel like with your golemness, with whatever you have in your possession, you will not allow me to have some kind of celebratory, some kind of joy with what I saw from Mark Williams in the first game. Because here's the thing about Mark. I don't deny that the lack of physicality is a problem in quite a few games. Like against Atlanta, I thought he showed up. There were times Clint Capella got his win, but I thought he really showed up. Against the Wizards in that 20-rebound game, I think we have different opinions on that. I think he battled against Gafford. In the first game, I think they did allow him to like do whatever he wanted because they just didn't care and they were going to shoot 3-pointers with Danilo Gallinari. Mark Williams has not been consistent this year. And that's something that I took for granted this offseason. Like I took for what I thought was going to happen was, okay, this is someone that's crazy smart. He's huge. He's athletic. The guy can't fail, and I just expect him to continue to improve and improve and improve and improve and improve, and we're not going to have any setbacks. And that was not the right mindset because he's had setbacks this year. He's also given us some awesome performances. He also gives you the avenue to explore something that the Hornets have never been able to explore before, which is actual legitimate rim protection. But you're right, Doug. Like there are some things that he needs to clean up in order for Steve Clifford to feel good about him consistently. The 23 minutes, while it might seem like a shock because he didn't play the fourth quarter in this one, he's had times where that's about what he'll play. Like that's not crazy off the mark of his average per game. It was just so visible because it was closing time and Clifford thought he was seeing a good enough thing with Nick Richards out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's shocking for Steve Clifford to say into a microphone that the team's rim protection was better with Nick Richards on the floor and not Mark Williams, the guy that we've seen block three-point shots and generally be a force down low at times. But his block percentage is way down. It was 2.7% in the few games, 17 games that he started last year. Now it's down to 1.4%. And, I mean, you saw it against – last couple of games against the Knicks, and then before that as well, where guys are figuring out ways to shoot over Mark Williams. You know, they don't get all the way to the paint, and that can be an asset to a defense to not let them get all the way to the rim. But Mark Williams is coming out for some of these blocks and not being successful, and then it puts the defense in scramble mode. And look, when the Hornets get put into one single rotation defensively, it's almost an automatic dunk. I mean, you saw that over and over against Miami. If they make one mistake in pick and roll, if Mark Williams drops when he's not supposed to drop, or he drops too far and can't recover, like it's just a killer. And maybe that's unfair to Mark. I don't know. But this team cannot rotate on defense. That's not all Mark's fault. But it typically will start at the center position. You know, those failures typically start with that guard. That first pick and roll that happens mid-high with the guard in the center. And so, that I guess Clifford just liked what he saw out of Richards, and Richards got the minutes. But it's not great, man. I mean, this was Mark Williams was supposed to be the guy that fixed the defense, and the defense is last in the league, and Mark's struggling.
Yeah, Mark has been struggling a couple of these games. And the thing about Mark, though, is like I hope – I mean, you can see him get back to it. And that's the thing where the guy is still so young. It's still essentially his rookie season if you're just talking about volumes of games. But the offseason doesn't really make him a rookie. I'm not trying to say that. But he does not have a lot of NBA games under his belt. We'll see what happens with a full-strength type of roster where you have smarter basketball players out there rather than all the young ones that you put out in this particular game. Nick Richards was playing better, and sometimes he has that capability. I don't expect it for the long term. I tell you that. Like, I don't expect this to be a trend. Steve Clifford even told you Mark Williams is a top 5 player on this roster. Like, he flat out said that. And I imagine Clifford is going to try to make it work. And he did so against Washington when you did have the second game after he got killed because they went 5 out, and he did have 20 rebounds and there was a better battle. But yeah, it was bad against the Heat. And what's unfortunate is that he played well against the Heat last year. It's one of his shining moments. So, didn't happen this go around. The Heat got the better one on him. All right, that'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. Make sure you go check out Doug's Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. And then you can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. We'll be back with you tomorrow to gear up for another in-season tournament game at the Spectrum Center against the Milwaukee Bucks.
My nuggets.